Bye-bye.
Hi. Hoping for a crisp breeze to help keep you alert. Oh, he took a sip of water too. That'll probably help. You were probably gonna turn down the radio too, so you could focus, right?
Probably okay isn't okay.
Right?
If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend.
I think the water line is what really drove it home. I blew on him. Hi, I'm a warning sign. I let people know when they're... Oh, gotta go.
I'll be right back.
Hi.
The views and opinions expressed by the individuals in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Metaphor Creative Media, its parent, or its affiliates.
As police officers, we're witness to some of the most amazing things in life. Some comical, some horrendous, and some just plain miraculous. When asked why you went into law enforcement, most officers will tell you, because it's like having a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. Today, we saved you a front row seat. This is Cobservations.
From Broadcast Beat Studios in Oakland Park, Florida, Metaphor Creative Media presents a show that gives you a personal glimpse of what law enforcement officers see and do in their typical and not so typical day of work. From walking the beat to detective, Rob has 35 years of law enforcement experience. Although the staff are all active or former law enforcement, any views, opinions, and all other show content are in no way official views, statements, or policies of any law enforcement agency. To talk to our hosts, call the podcast studio at area code 954-210-5413. That's 954-210-5413.
Hello again, and welcome to Cobservations, your front row seat to the greatest show on earth. I'm Rob, your host. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you that we broadcast live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. from the Broadcast Beat Studios located in Oakland Park, Florida. Here on Cobservations, we attempt to give you a glimpse of what law enforcement officers do on a daily basis. We'll also talk about recent happenings and the latest topics pertaining to law enforcement that not only affect officers, but the general public as well. In law enforcement, the color of the uniform does not define the officer. We all have the same mission, to protect and serve the citizens and communities we patrol. More importantly, our mission is to go home at the end of the day. Unfortunately, in our profession, not everyone gets to go home, which was the case just last week right here in our own community, where Broward County Sheriff Benjamin Nimtz was laid to rest after being killed in the line of duty on July 21st, leaving behind a wife and 2 young children. Our prayers are with the Nimtz family. This is why so many officers live by the motto, it's better to be tried by 12 than to be carried by 6. I also want to remind everybody that if you'd like to call in to discuss this or any other subject, you can give the podcast studio a call at 954-210-5413. Last week I had the pleasure of having Richie with me. I was hoping he would be back this week, continue the conversation, but unfortunately he had prior commitment. One of the things Richie mentioned, which rings true, is that some parents threaten their misbehaving children with arrest when they see a uniformed officer, or threaten to have them taken away. This only instills a fear of the police and teaches them to be wary of law enforcement, which is what we don't want. On the other hand, recently it was alleged that the Chicago Chamber of Commerce hosted an event which small children were giving sticks and encouraged to beat a piñata that resembled an ICE agent. What the hell were they thinking? What are they teaching their children? It wasn't cute or amusing. So recently in the news also, there was a 4th person that was arrested in connection with the NYPD's officers being subjected to having water dumped on them. This display of actions is an affront not only to the police, but also to every law-abiding citizen. Recently, a Republican from Long Island wanted to make dousing water on police officers punishable by up to 4 years and make it a Class E felony. He also stated that what we witnessed was disgraceful. To show such little respect for our brave police officers is abhorrent, but speaks to the bigger issue of how poorly they are treated in the mainstream media and under the de Blasio administration. The Assemblyman said, and I quote, "If this was the mayor or some other elected official having water thrown on them while trying to work, there would be national outrage and the offenders would be locked up. These men and women go to work each day to protect our communities, unsure if they will return home to their families. They should be treated with the utmost respect and dignity by all." Also recently in the news this past weekend, NYPD officers had bottles thrown at them at the Bronx when they were trying to break up a large fight. In a second incident, there was a chunk of concrete also thrown at officers while in Central Park. There were no injuries reported on that. In the Bronx, one of the gentlemen, this James Evans, was arrested after he threw several bottles at the police officers. The officers were treated for minor injuries. In the second incident, none of the officers were injured when concrete was thrown at them. There are no suspects, and the investigation is continuing at this time. You know, what's going on in the news is it's crazy, the abuse that the police are forced to take, and sometimes the lack of reaction. People just can't understand it. Times are crazy. What people have to understand, the police are the thin blue line standing between good and evil, civility and chaos. And if people feel that they can attack the police in this fashion without fear of consequence, God help you, the general public. Most people don't realize the wide range of incidents that we handle daily and the effects they cause on us every day. What's more disturbing to me than anything else these days is the increase in police suicide. It's a very big problem. It seems to be growing. This year so far, the New York City Police Department has experienced 7 suicides, with 5 occurring in the last 2 months. It's unfortunate, but unfortunately for me, I knew one of those officers, Detective Joseph Calabrese. I went to school with Joe, and he became a police officer shortly before I did. Over the years, our paths would cross, and Joe was a great guy. He was very involved with the union, was always willing to help out people. He was a family man, and will be definitely he'll be missed. Unfortunately, he didn't get the help for himself. Nobody knows the demons that people are struggling with. Also recently, there was an off-duty NYPD transit sergeant who was found with a self-inflicted gun wound in Staten Island. He was found after his co-workers became worried that he didn't show up for work. This was all during the summer. As law enforcement officers, we respond and witness some of the most tragic events that happen in our communities. We go to work every day and have to deal with everyone's problems, then go home and have to handle our own. On-the-job stress can have a significant impact on physical and mental well-being, which can accumulate over the course of a career. Many officers unfortunately struggle with alcohol abuse, depression, and suicidal thoughts, post-traumatic stress disorders, and other challenges. What I want to do is state a couple of facts pertaining to police suicide. Nearly 1 in 4 police officers has thoughts of suicide at some point in their life. The officer's suicide rate is 4 times higher than that of firefighters. In the smallest departments, this increases almost 4 times the national average. More officers have been killed by suicide or taken their own lives than in the line of duty. There were an estimated 140 police suicides in 2017 compared to 129 in the line of duty deaths. Compared to the general population, law enforcement report much higher rates of depression, PTSD, burnout, and other anxiety-related issues. Oftentimes as police officers, we counsel people. We refer them to help, different help, psychological help, marriage counselors, but for some reason, we don't do it for ourselves. I don't know if it's because we see ourselves as the problem solvers or afraid it'll be a sign of weakness. Unfortunately, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I ask everybody out there, all law enforcement, all first responders, if you find yourself experiencing similar effects or if you feel you're in a dark place with no way out, there's help out there. Pick up the phone, call up one of your brothers or sisters in blue. And guys, if you see a change in behavior, somebody that you work with, if they're not acting the same, if they become withdrawn and they're just not acting normally, ask, hey, is everything okay? Ask a question. lend a shoulder. You may save a life. There are many organizations out there for everybody. One is PAPA, and it's for all police officers. And you can call 888-COPS-COPS or 888-267-7267. The lines are manned 24/7. If you can't get through there, ask a union rep. Everybody's out there to help you. You don't have to suffer in silence. With that being said, tonight we're going to be talking about death. Unfortunately, police officers deal with it day in and day out. We all meet up with it one way or another. How we get there is an entirely different question. So it becomes routine, just like anything else. Anything that we do becomes routine, and we kind of become numb to it. You know, let me get back to a second. I think one of the problems that police officers have not asking for help, it used to be taboo to ask for help, to seek for assistance. A lot of officers were afraid that if they had a problem, they admitted they had a psychological problem or it was a depression, automatically their guns would be taken away and they would be confined to desk duty. Thankfully, it's not the case anymore. That's a thing of the past. So tonight I have a guest with me, Fred. Fred's a retired New York City police officer and came from a different department. Originally, it's funny, back in the day, the New York City Police Department was comprised of 3 departments. The NYPD was the umbrella for the housing police and the transit police. And then it was years later, there was a merge where everybody fell under the one umbrella.
We all put the same badge on, yeah.
That's right. Fred, when did you start your law enforcement career?
1990.
Okay, and like I ask everybody, what was your reason for getting involved in law enforcement?
It was almost like a natural thing. My father was a corrections officer, so my father was a corrections officer, so it was a kind of a strict upbringing. And I don't know, it was just my uncle was a police officer in New Jersey. I think a lot of us just come from those blue collar families where it was either law enforcement or firefighter. I ended up choosing law enforcement, or it chose me.
Yeah, some people say it's a calling. Some people get into it for the wrong reason, and some people it's a calling. It's a job that I've always felt satisfying and never worried about going to work. It wasn't something where I hated my job or I don't want to go to work because I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, it was the great part of it was every day was different, and there was always opportunities to help people, which made you feel good. Like you said, it wasn't always just about arresting people and,
no, it wasn't
doing bad things. It's you helped people. You got to see people at the worst times of their life sometimes.
Absolutely, at the worst times and the best times.
Yeah.
And every day was an adventure. You never knew what you were getting into.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So in 1990, at that time, was it still 3 separate departments, or was
Yes.
it the merge?
Yes, 3 separate departments.
Okay.
I think somehow they had some formula to break it up. Housing and transit got a small portion of the list, and then the bulk of the list would go to NYPD.
Okay. And you went to housing.
Well, that's where I was sent. I showed up. They said, "Oh, you're housing," and okay, let me see this through and see what it was like. And it was a extremely different world for me. I grew up in Staten Island,
right?
Basically the suburbs, and very very little exposure to the projects. Let's say, we had them on Staten Island, but it was you don't go over there,
right?
So once I started working in the projects, it was just extremely different. The job itself, the housing, it was maybe we had 3,500 cops at the time, so it was had a family feel to it. Everybody kind of knew everybody, and the older guys always looked out for us. It wasn't so much getting thrown to the wolves, but it was maybe a faster paced, process. I think you had the opportunity to handle more jobs, right, usually in a day.
Well, it's funny that you say that. because it was constantly, and it's a joke, and I know you've heard it before. Oh, housing is
Housing unavailable.
Housing unavailable. Transit unavailable. You know, I started in '84, and it was the 3 different departments, NYPD, and we had the projects. I was in Coney Island, so we had the Marlboro projects, we had the Surfside projects, a lot of projects, and then we had transit. And there were times where if housing wasn't available, they would send us into housing.
Right.
And if transit wasn't available, they would send us into transit. And if we weren't available, the job would hold.
Yeah. Your precinct is in backlog.
Right. But what I also found out also was housing and transit were well-kept secrets. You know, at least I thought so. It was a much friendlier atmosphere. I know in New York, when you came into the precinct, and anybody who's been on the job and you can tell you, when you came into the precinct, you stood in front of a desk, and you spoke to the sergeant over the desk. I remember going to one of the PSAs. It was PSA 1. Going in there, the cops weren't on the opposite. They were all behind the desk.
Yeah.
You know, it was friendly.
Yeah.
It was much friendlier.
Yeah, it was a little more relaxed, I think. I hated going into a precinct in the beginning. There was just that animosity when we walked in. Most of the time, the desk sergeant or the lieutenant really didn't want to know what we were coming in there for. You know, they always thought we were bringing trouble or a problem, and
Right.
you know, whether it was just to drop something off, maybe a mail run or something.
You feel like you were treated like second-class citizens?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny because in my mind, it was at the time we had different patches.
Yeah.
But we all did the same job. You know, we were all police officers and all New York City police officers.
We'd have people come up to us. They'd flag us down on the street in a car, and they'd come up to us and look, and then you get that weird look in their eye, and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wanted a real cop." Yeah, okay. Have a nice day. I'm gonna go about my business now.
All right. You know, I came down to South Florida in 2001. I was doing my training. I went to a housing location, and I remember one of the guys I was with was telling me, and I don't remember the exact location, but you know, this is housing. It's not good here. And I looked
Right down here in Florida.
Yeah, and I looked. And I said, "Are you crazy? This is beautiful."
I've seen some places guys are like, "Oh, you would never want to work." That'd be like a working vacation in some of the areas. That was one of the things I never looked at going rolling over, as what we used to call it. I never looked at the rolling over because I don't know that I would have been able to behave or operate in a more subtle environment, like typical neighborhoods that I grew up in. If I had to go be a cop there, I'm not sure. I mean, we were handling a lot of family disputes.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's just you got to go in there and, you know, you got to be the judge and the punisher and decide who's right, who's wrong. And, you know, not everybody needs to go to jail after a family fight, but
Right.
you know, why do I have to be here? Why are you arguing over this, you know?
A lot of it was nonsense. Unfortunately, today now, with the things with family disputes, a lot of our discretion is gone.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm saying even prior to the body-worn cameras, there was a time you'd go to a family dispute, and we all have problems. Everybody can relate to financial issues or health issues or infidelity. But there was a point you were able to tell somebody, hey, go take a walk, come back in an hour.
Yeah.
Cool off, come back in an hour. And now that discretion is gone. It's, he slapped you? And there's,
yeah, the
all right,
domestic abuse.
Somebody's going to jail.
Yeah, that definitely escalated. And even when I was retired in 2001, but even back then, domestic abuse was a big issue. It was a hot button issue, and you know, a lot of discretion was taken out of everyone's hands with that.
All right. You know, what I'd like to talk about tonight is the active shooters. Okay, it seems that they're on the increase. They're definitely on the rise. Just recently in El Paso, Texas, 22 people were killed and an additional 26 were injured. And the law enforcement response was incredible. It was just phenomenal. I mean, it's one for the record books how they were able to take this person into custody so quickly without even firing a round.
Yeah.
It was just absolutely incredible. You know, unfortunately, less than 24 hours later, there was another active shooter in Dayton, Ohio. And this guy came prepared. I mean, he was dressed in body armor, and he was on a mission.
Yeah, he was.
And,
He even shot his own sister.
Yeah,
At the beginning of it, I think, which is really bizarre.
And a friend. There was a friend in the car.
There's
so
three of them. The two of them. Yeah, he went into a bar with the two of them.
it was just absolutely amazing.
It's hard to figure the rationale. I don't think you can really.
No, you can't. You don't know
You
what
can't
goes
understand what's going on through their mind.
through the minds of people.
How is this a viable solution, or how is this even an option? You know, things have gotten this bad that.
And the amazing thing in Dayton that the police response was less than a minute.
Well,
You know,
I think
they
they
were
were all
nearby.
on the scene. It was like a working detail almost, because it was a nightlife kind of spot. So that was good. But even still, he was able to shoot a fair amount of people with them being on him right away.
It was amazing, you know.
He was determined.
You know, and unfortunately, this is the 251st mass shooting in the United States this year. And every time one of these horrific incidents happens, you know, the calls go out and the cries go out for gun control, gun control, gun control, gun control. And I agree with gun control, but not the way people are screaming about it, because it's not realistic.
They just want to wipe everything off the board, and it's not always a gun problem. It's a people problem too.
Oh, absolutely. You know, there should definitely be stricter background checks, possibly a mandatory psychological evaluation before they give it. You know, and there'll be outcry. People will fight that. You know, you try to think of a solution, you know, but that might be one thing. You know, anybody who's diagnosed with a mental disorder should definitely, or cannot get a firearm. You know, another thing is registration of firearms. Okay, it's very weak. You know, the registration. Some states you don't have to register them at all. Some you do.
But you have to register your car.
Right. Exactly. You know,
I don't mind the registration part. Is just don't charge me $200 for the sake of putting my name on a list.
Right.
You know, it has to be a fair thing about it. And agencies need to be not just police agencies, but other agencies in general need to be a little more proactive about it. Nicholas Cruz, the incident that happened down here at Storm and Douglas, it's come to light. He was in a lot of trouble for a long time. He was a problem for a long time, and everybody just kept sweeping it under the carpet.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, they were afraid of slapping a label on somebody or putting a stigmatism on someone. Listen, if something's going wrong, then something's going wrong. It has to be addressed.
Absolutely. At the very least, it has to be fully investigated. You know, another thing is gun sales. You know, there are states where there's really no regulations with gun sales.
Right.
You know, I could sell one to Joe Schmo
Mm-hmm.
as long as he gives me the money. You know, maybe another alternative, and I'm sure people won't be happy with it, is to possibly make all gun sales go through a middleman, a licensed middleman.
I think that's a fair option. A licensed dealer. You know, again, I'm not going out and doing bad things with weapons, so I don't have a problem with having to buy it legally,
Right.
and there being a process for it. I think if you'll always have those dark alleys where you can go down and get a gun that's got numbers scratched off it, or removed by acid or whatever. That just human nature. You're never going to end that.
Absolutely. You see, and that's what people have to realize. It's the an evil-minded person, and there are many lurking among us, is not going to obey gun laws.
Well, don't we already have laws saying you can't go out and shoot everybody you see?
Right. You can't drink and drive.
Right.
People are going to do.
They're going to do it if they
Right.
want to do it. They're still doing it. They're still
Right.
drinking and driving, and unfortunately getting into accidents and killing others.
Yeah, the only people that are going to abide by the laws are law-abiding
Law-abiding
citizens that wouldn't be able to protect themselves or their families if the need be.
Mm-hmm.
So we can only attempt to make it harder for the people who have evil in their hearts to get the weapons. But guys, we're never going to stop it. It's just never going to stop.
No, and it's not fair to take the right to protect your home and family away from the others that aren't doing evil.
No, it's not. It's always the good that are penalized. You know, I don't know what the answer is. Maybe we should adopt a legal open carry policy.
They do say states with open carry have lower crimes.
You know, it makes you think twice.
It does. When you know everyone else out there has something, it's the reason I don't normally carry since I moved down here, and everybody else has a gun. I'm just going to go hide behind a wall and call 911. Okay, you guys duke this one out. I'm going to be the bystander calling the cops.
You know, it's funny that you say that, because when I first came down here originally, I wasn't carrying all the time, and I enjoyed not carrying. It was nice.
It's a liability.
Well,
it's a liability.
I didn't think if that was just nice, not to have that weight on my side, not having to dress around it.
I still have to go to the chiropractor.
You know, I didn't want to dress around it. I didn't have to worry if I bent over, my gun popped out. And somebody's,
Yeah,
oh my God, he's
basically
got a
I live
gun.
in gym shorts down here, so it's difficult to carry a weapon like that sometimes.
Absolutely. And then, but then what I realized also is everybody down here has guns.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be that guy that, God forbid, I need it, and I don't have it. I want it and never want to need it.
I struggle with that sometimes. And it's become more of a thought in my head lately with more shootings that occur. I guess you could say I'm rethinking my policy.
Yeah.
I just don't want to have to do anything that would endanger my family or anybody. If something goes down, I don't want to be there and having to make that decision if I have one of my children or my wife with me or something.
I guess it's personal choice. In 2017, the FBI conducted a study, and in the second phase, released the following information, and I just want to read this. The key findings: the 63 active shooters examined in this study did not appear to be uniform in any way such that they could be readily identified prior to attacking based on demographics alone. Active shooters take time to plan and prepare for the attack, with 77% of the subjects spending a week or longer planning their attack and 46% spending a week or longer actually preparing for the attack and procuring a means. A majority of the active shooters obtain their firearms legally, with only very small percentages obtaining a firearm illegally. The FBI could only verify that 25% of active shooters in the study had ever been diagnosed with a mental illness. Of those diagnosed, only 3 had been diagnosed with a psychotic disorder. Active shooters were typically experiencing multiple stressors, an average of 3.6 separate stressors in the year before they were attacked. On average, each active shooter displayed 4 to 5 concerning behaviors over time that were observable to others around the shooter. The most frequently occurring concerning behaviors were related to the active shooter's mental health, problematic interpersonal interactions, and leakage of violent intent. For active shooters under 18, school peers and teachers were more likely to observe concerning behaviors than family members. For active shooters 18 years old and over, spouses, domestic partners were most likely to observe concerning behaviors. When concerning behavior was observed by others, the most common response was to communicate directly to the active shooter, 83%, or do nothing, 54% of the time. In 41% of the cases, the concerning behavior was reported to law enforcement. Therefore, just because concerning behavior was recognized did not necessarily mean that it was reported to law enforcement. In those cases where the active shooter's primary grievance could be identified, the most common grievances were related to an adverse interpersonal or employment action against the shooter, 49% of the time. In the majority of cases, 64% of the time, at least one of the victims was specifically targeted by the active shooter. As police officers, when we engage in active shooter scenario, it's time to take care of business. There's no time for planning. It's go time. The planning would have been done during training. When I was back in New York, we never trained for active shooting. When I was there, it was something...
It's unheard of.
Yeah, it wasn't there. Unfortunately, when I came here, Florida, we started training, and the training over the years it changed. Originally
It evolves.
Absolutely.
The more scenarios happen, the more they digest it, and
absolutely,
and they were able to.
You have to
tailor
learn
the
to
training.
roll with the punches.
Yes.
Originally, I remember when we were trained, we'd go in 4 men deep in the diamond formation, and then it was okay. Well, it's 3 men, then it's 2 men. Now, it's at the point now. If it's you,
Yeah.
If there's one guy and there are shots being fired, you go in.
Mm-hmm.
You go in. Now, nobody's telling you to run in blindly, but you go in as tactfully as possible, and try to neutralize the threat. Because every time you hear a gunshot, there could be another victim.
Yeah.
And when the scene is active, a lot of times when you're going in, the priority is the shooter. It's not the victims at that time. You have to go in.
It's a cold, some people might feel that's a cold, callous thing, and it is, but you're right. You have to stop the carnage.
Absolutely.
Somebody else can come by and stop the bleeding.
Right after the fact. And unfortunately, that happens too, even when it's one of our own.
Yes.
Okay, even if it's one of our own, it's...
If you're fortunate enough to have enough people,
Yeah.
somebody can grab them and drag them out, one person, but yeah, you've got to find where the bullets are coming from and stop
Exactly.
that.
First order of business.
End of the threat.
Right, end the threat, stop the carnage. It's the first order of business. Then the second order of business becomes attending to the wounded. And then with that, you have to prioritize.
Triage.
you
Yeah.
know? And you may have somebody that's screaming, help me, and you can't.
No.
You know, you assess and you look and say, okay, yeah, it's bad, but I've got somebody over here who's been shot in the neck or shot in the chest, and you have to prioritize. You know, then once the treatment is done, that's when the investigation begins, and now you start to try to put the pieces together and find out the reasoning why.
Right.
You know, what the public doesn't realize that when these officers are lucky enough to come out of this scenario unscathed physically, okay, unharmed. Nobody physically.
Yeah.
Nobody sees the mental scars.
No.
You know, in this line of work, I've seen things that, you know, they're ingrained in my mind. Okay, and anytime I think of them, I can remember every homicide scene that I've went to. It's just things you can close your eyes and you're there. You can do it. And now these officers that respond to these mass shootings, where there are children involved, and it's just the carnage. It takes no effect. And earlier today, I spoke to a friend of mine, a colleague and a friend of mine, who was at the airport shooting, 2017 January.
Okay.
And he was there after the fact. He wasn't there while it was active. And I myself had responded to after the fact. The suspect was already in custody. But we were talking today, and I told him what I was going to be talking about, and he brought up the story. What he did was he assisted the FBI in reviewing the video surveillance of the incident at the airport. And he repeatedly viewed these different images. And one image that he told me, and I know it bothers him tremendously, there was a elderly couple. The husband was 90 years old, wife was 84, and they were going on a cruise. They flew in to go on a cruise to celebrate his 90th birthday. And he was looking at the video just the few minutes before the shooting started, and he described that you could tell they were carefree, they were happy, they were going to celebrate. She was being pushed by a sky cap in a wheelchair, and the next minute, she was gone. She was gone, and the husband sat by her side in a wheelchair for hours next to his wife, who was covered in a tarp, and refused to leave until the FBI at one point, you know, there was work to be done.
Yeah.
Scene had to be processed, and this is just one of the images, and you know, things change in a heartbeat.
And you would just watch this guy. He lost his world.
Yeah.
If he's 90,
90 years old.
They had to be married for a considerable length of time.
Yeah, 84 years old, and heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
a real
They were all
heartbreaking
prepared to
story.
go on a magnificent journey for them, and then it ends like that.
Yeah.
Before it even
So,
starts.
hey, guys, if you're out there and you're watching, I want to remind you that the phone lines are open, and if you'd like to give us a call, please do at 954-210-5413. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back shortly to continue the conversation. So, see you in a little bit.
I surrender.
All right, pal. Get ready for the day, buddy.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's that?
Do we have a gun?
Why do you ask that, kiddo?
Can I play with it?
No, absolutely not. It's not a toy. You know that.
Do I? I bet it looks like one.
Yeah, well, it's not. Anyway, I need it to protect you, your sister and Mom.
From what?
From bad guys, like on TV.
But what about the 8 kids who get shot every day by mistake? Their daddies probably thought they were safe too.
Where'd you hear that?
TV.
Yeah, well, maybe we don't believe everything we hear on TV.
Where do you keep it?
It's hidden.
I bet it's on the top shelf of the closet, under your sweatshirts. Is it loaded?
It's not. I keep the
In
bullets.
the boots with the red laces, and the chest beside the bed, I haven't found them yet, but I'm sure I can. You always told me to be curious. Remember when I found my Christmas gift? I'm a good climber, you know.
No, that's not what I meant. Look, I need to be ready if someone breaks in.
What about when it's just me and Mom? You taught me to be brave. I could use the gun to protect her.
No, Justin, I promise. I'll teach you how to handle a gun when you're old enough.
And what if I don't make it to old enough? I could get bullied and decide it's too much for me. It would be so easy with our gun.
Our gun? No, buddy. My gun.
But it is our gun, in our home. Happens all the time.
I'll make sure that doesn't happen. I'm always here for you.
But Dad, you're not always here.
Today, with seasonal temperatures, we should reach our normal high of about 82 degrees by this afternoon. Clear skies tonight with a low near 70. Increasing cloudiness tomorrow, sticky and humid with a high of 56. With the winds up to the east. To talk to our hosts, call the podcast studio at area code 954-210-5413. That's 954-210-5413.
And we're back. I'd like to thank my guest Fred for coming back at the last moment. It was a last-minute notification. Fred stepped up to the plate.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And I just want to let everybody know, last episode, we had a record-breaking 2,300 views.
Nice.
Which is pretty
That's
incredible.
exciting.
We're pretty happy about that. And I'd like to see those numbers keep going. So if you're enjoying this podcast, please spread the word. Tell your friends. And if you'd like to get in on the action, give us a call, 954-210-5413. You know, tonight's topic is death. It's a part of life. From the day we're born, we live to die. It's normal. At one time or another, we all face it, whether it's a pet or a family member. As police officers, dealing with death becomes as routine as anything else. Some deaths are natural due to illness. Some are accidents. Some are suicides or homicides. And death by your own hands. And sometimes both are justified, unfortunately. My first experience with death was in the police academy. You know, when I was 15, my grandmother passed away, but
Yeah, I had an aunt or uncle who had died before when I was younger, and it doesn't. I don't know.
it's different.
Yeah,
It's definitely different. And I remember,
I think it's more sanitized, because you just somebody passed, you go see them at the funeral home,
and that's it.
Yeah.
You don't really. It is, depending on how close you are with that relative,
Well,
it affects you. Some people,
right,
I've had
yeah.
people that my family, unfortunately, that passed away. I was like, oh, sorry to hear, and okay. But
and then there's
what's for
others that
dinner?
really hit you hard and you cry.
Absolutely. In the academy, it was during the police science curriculum of the academy. It was the day before we came in, and the police instructor said, hey, tomorrow you guys are going to view autopsies.
Bring in the Vicks.
Yeah, bring in the Vicks, that's right. You're jumping ahead of me.
Sorry.
That's okay. But he said, tomorrow you're going to go view autopsies, and right after that, you're going for meal. So I was like, yeah, great.
That's great.
Yeah, who wants to eat? But like you mentioned, he said, little tip, bring some Vicks and put it underneath your nostrils so it masks the smell of death. And the smell of death is something you smell it once and you remember it for any time after that. You know what you're dealing with.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I remember we got to the Bellevue morgue, and the first stop was the meat freezer. And you go in there, and we were 30 recruits, and they had one wall that was a dedicated freezer.
Right.
It had all these different compartments and with rollout trays, and it was like being in show and tell. And we were nervous. You didn't know what to expect. But one thing you noticed, the Vicks worked like a charm. You didn't smell a thing. It was like,
Yeah.
hey, this stuff is good. My instructor knows what he's talking about. And I remember they pulled out the first body, and happened to be a woman, maybe in her mid-20s, early 30s, completely nude except for the toe tag on her foot that had all the information, about the body. And, you looked at it, and I remember somebody in the back saying something very inappropriate. And you can use your imagination. I won't get into it
There's
from
always
here.
one in the crowd.
There's always one. After that, we went into the actual autopsy room. And the first thing you notice when you went into the autopsy room is that even with the Vicks, it smells.
Yeah.
You know, it smells. You
Strong,
can smell it.
strong.
And you say, you know, thank God you had it on. And then I remember that there were tables, I believe there were like 4 steel tables that were laid out, and each one had a body on it. And next to those tables, there was another tray with all the tools of the trade, you know, mallets, saws, buckets, and all that. And, you know, some of us were fighting for a spot in the back, and some of us were fighting for a spot in the front. Well, also the spot in the front because you wanted to see it. And the whole thing was surreal. I mean, the body itself, I remember when I was watching the autopsy, it was an elderly male, and the body itself seemed larger than life. And the first cut that the attendant made with the scalpel was, you know, to the forehead from ear to ear. And you watch it in amazement, and I remember he took the skin and pulled it back over the head, all the layers of skin, and it almost seemed like a mask.
Not something you see every day.
Yeah, it seemed like a mask, and it was just like, wow. And then the next thing they did was they took the buzzsaw and they took the top of the skull off, right, and then reached in and pulled out the brain. And it was like, you know, and then everything else was performed in robotic fashion. You know, they take out all the organs, they examine them, they weigh them, they look for any discrepancies. There's an actual chart of what each organ is supposed to weigh in a normal person. And if there are any discrepancies, then they examine it more. Did you have to view?
I'm trying to remember. I don't think... At the time, when I went in 1990, I was, at that point, we were the largest class to go through the academy at that time.
How many were you?
I don't remember.
Because
it was,
I know
it was a big group. It was under Dinkins, the Safe Streets, Safe City program.
We went in, my class was also one of the big ones. I think we were 2,200 and change. You know, it's funny because when I came out here, I was talking to one of the guys, and he was telling me, oh, yeah, we had a very big academy class this year. I said, really? How many? Oh, I think there were about 38. I was like, 38? I had 30-something in my company. I said, we were 2,200
I want to say 27, maybe 27, 27, 2,800. I'm not sure. I don't remember, but I don't know that we got to sit there and watch.
Well, I know. I think they may have stopped it at some time. I'm not sure. So let me ask you this: because after we watched the autopsies, because we behaved ourselves so well, we got to go to the morgue museum.
That I definitely was not privileged to
Okay,
see.
because that you would remember. The morgue museum was, I think it was on the second floor of Bellevue Hospital, and it's something that the public knew nothing about. It wasn't open to the public. It was only open to police officers coming through the academy at the time and visiting medical dignitaries. And I remember when we went in there, the first thing we were told, like school kids, keep your hands in your pockets and don't touch anything. And there were things in jars, abnormal things in jars that the normal person wouldn't believe.
Stuff you didn't expect to see.
There were things, you know, the question was, well, how did they get half of these things? You know, isn't somebody wondering, you know, what happened to you know, some of these body parts that were in
Are these like
jars?
the big jaws like Frankenstein's
Yes,
lab
these
with
were
the
big
glass
jars.
jars with the lid?
There was, God, I remember there was, you know, different dismembered parts. I mean, there were women's breasts in there. There were women that were dismembered. And ended up in jars. I think it was, I'm not sure the year, I don't know if it was the 1975, there was a plane crash. And one of the jars, there was actually half of a face. And it was amazing to see because the half face, you could see the nose and the mouth, and you could see the teeth and the hair on his face.
Which is perfectly sheared in half.
Yeah, and that you could see the hair. He had some growth, and it was unbelievable. But one thing that I'll always remember and I'll never forget, it's almost like a public safety announcement. If you're ever in the subway station, okay, that third rail has about 625 volts of electricity. And some guy thought it was a good idea. And he must have had a very good stream because he was able to go from the platform and make contact with the third rail.
He reached the third rail.
He reached the third rail, and unfortunately for him, it completed a circuit.
I think you left out, what did he reach the third rail with?
With the urine.
Oh, he was urinating.
Yeah,
okay.
He was urinating, and I guess, you know, it can conduct electricity.
Yeah.
Because the electricity arced back, and in the jar was his penis, thumb, and 2 fingers. So if you're ever in the subway... Did
he actually survive, or that just fell off?
That we don't... That was the electricity took it. He could have survived. Whether or not he wanted to survive after that is another story.
That's a brutal one.
That's another story.
Yeah, we didn't see that. We had a EMT in my company, and she had a thick photo album. She'd been an EMT for, I don't know, maybe 5-8 years.
Right.
And she had quite a collection of Polaroids, suicides and different things, people who jumped from a building and hit the spiked railing fence and then continued on to another building, and they were just, bodies were just, intestines strewn across from one building to the other.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing that the things you see, and, you handle things in almost robotic fashion. You got to go to work.
Yeah.
This is your job. You got to deal with it. You got to
shut
handle
it down.
Yeah, you do. In my career, I've seen people that have jumped off 23-story buildings.
Oh, that happened a lot with us. We had tall stories.
Sure, the projects,
tall buildings.
Absolutely.
So people always take the easy solution. I say an easy solution, but people take the plunge off of them a lot of times.
Yeah.
And each one is different. There was one time we were there, and I'm standing up looking at the building, and the detective comes up to me and goes, "You see the two streaks?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "That's when the guy decided letting go was a bad idea."
Yeah, unfortunately, it's
He tried to grab the hold of the wall, and it just kept going down.
Yeah, when you try to change your mind in the middle, it usually doesn't work out too well. Remember, as a young police officer, one of my first experiences with death on patrol, and I want to explain how it's RMP works, radio motor patrol. Yeah. 2 people assigned to the car. I know you know how it works, but for everybody out there who's listening that doesn't, there's an operator and recorder, and you switch every 4 hours. The first half, somebody drives, he's the operator. The other person records, and recording entails taking all the police reports. If there are any arrests to be made, you get stuck with them if your partner doesn't want them. It's just the way it was explained. Being the recorder is the dirty part of the tour. And if you're lucky, nothing happens when you're the recorder and you get to switch. And that includes dealing with death, with dead people. If the bodies have to be searched, the recorder has to search it. Well, on this particular day, it was in July, and we get a call for a possible DOA inside a basement apartment. And when my partner and I pulled up on the scene, we knew it was bad when we saw the sergeant's operator. In New York, the sergeants had drivers. The sergeant's operator was outside spraying Lysol. Outside before we even got in.
Nice and ripe.
Luckily for me, I was the operator. And as we come into this basement, you just get hit with this stench. It was like a blanket. I mean, it was horrible.
It's like walking into a wall.
Yeah, it was horrible. And it was an elderly man. He'd been dead in there for about 3 weeks. Okay, in the summer, in July, summertime with no ventilation, and no air conditioning. And he was only clad in his underwear, and I remember he had a shirt, and he was, somehow or another, he fell over. He was over a box, hunched over a box. And I remember I took out my rubber gloves, and I gladly gave them to my partner with a smile on my face. I was like, here you go. Better him than me. And now it was time to search the body. We searched the bodies if there were any valuables that had to be safeguarded, if there was any jewelry. And as he started to move this gentleman's arm, it sounded as though it was starting to fall off.
Oh.
Yeah. And at that point, the sergeant made a command decision and said, hey, listen, whatever he's got, when the morgue guys come,
we'll find it then.
Yeah, find it then. Boom. And we left, and they got a foot post that had to sit with the body. The funny thing, it was about 3 weeks later, I was working with somebody else, and it was in August, and we get a very similar call. Landlord hasn't seen his tenant in about 3 weeks, and he knows he's sick. And we pull up, and first thing I want to know is, well, are there any dogs in the apartment? And he said, yeah, there's a dog in there. And he didn't have keys to the apartment. The window was open, the bathroom window was open. I said, hey, listen, could you do me a favor? If you know the dog, can you go in there and put the dog away so we can enter? And he said, yeah. So he climbs through the window, and he comes running out a minute too late, and you could tell he was holding his breath. He's like, oh. He said, hey, the body's in the kitchen. It stinks in there, the body's in the kitchen. So me and my partner go in, and there's dog crap and piss all over the place. And we're walking through, trying to not step in anything, and it stinks in there. And sure enough, I see the body laying face down in the kitchen, and his pants are down almost to around his knees. And as I walk in, you can see for some reason he had the 4 jets on the stove, but there was nothing on it, thank God, but the jets were burning. And, you know, when people die, they lose control of their bodily functions.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked at him, he obviously did.
Right.
And I was like, oh, great. Unfortunately for me, I was the recorder. Okay. So I was the recorder, and I looked at this guy. His hands were all blown up, and I was calling out his name and getting no response. So at that point, I called to the sergeant. We had to have the sergeant respond to the EMS, let them know we have a DOA. There was no phone in the apartment, so I went upstairs to use the neighbors to call the medical examiner. And while I was up there, the sergeant and the EMTs respond. I'm up there a minute or two giving the medical examiner all the information. And all of a sudden, the sergeant starts screaming for me. He said, get down here and buy this man a cup of coffee. And I go downstairs, and this guy is now sitting up. And his stomach, there was a huge gaping wound on his stomach that was turning black. He was actually rotting. Just as the EMTs were about to pronounce him dead, they saw something. He was a diabetic.
Oh, so it was like a diabetic coma.
Yeah, and
Oh, my
they were
goodness.
able to, I guess, shoot him up with insulin, whatever it is, and he was drinking orange juice. And
Holy cow.
yeah, so it was amazing. It's something I never heard the end of. The following day at roll call, we're standing at roll call, and the sergeant makes an announcement. He says, listen, if anybody gets any DOAs today, just call Dr. Lerner or Dr. Caulfield, and they'll come pronounce him dead for you. I was like, great. And then as I was walking out, one of the old-timers says to me, hey, kid, next time give him the kick test.
The kick test?
Next time kick him. have you had
Would you even responded to that?
Hey.
I've never heard that. I've never heard a story like that either. That's
That's
incredible.
Yeah. Anything similar? Yeah. Any experiences?
Yeah, we had plenty of people pass away that we had to go. I was a foot post, had to sit have dinner with dead bodies all the time.
Right.
Sometimes we'd get in there, same thing, summer, cooking in an apartment for a couple of days, and you'd get in there and either a cat was nibbling at the body or they looked like they were mummified. I had one that looked like he was a mummy. That's I don't know that I have any crazy DOAs. There was one thing I did was silly. We would always burn coffee grinds or something to try and knock the
old
smell
coffee
out of
grinds,
the
right?
right. Well, we were on one job and couldn't find any coffee. So me being the guy that thinks on his feet, I get a dish towel. And I used to be a smoker then, so I had a lighter. And I go into the bathroom and I light the dish towel on fire and stick it into the tub. Get the smoke, knock the smell out of the apartment. Well, I didn't move the shower curtains far enough away, and the shower curtains got caught up on fire. And then we almost had a fully involved fire in the apartment. The only thing that saved me was I was able to get the fire out with the shower head. And my sergeant, she come and told me, she's like, if we had to call FD, I would have beat the living crap out of you. And she never let me forget that one. Even years after, when we were texting, and she was, remember that time you almost burnt the apartment down? I'm like, oh.
Yeah, there are a lot of things we do on this job that make us famous with our peers. Unfortunately, this job, it's real. What we do is real. It's portrayed on television. It's cops and robbers, and it's fun, and crimes are solved in 45 minutes, homicides.
Everybody knows how to do our job because they've
great.
seen it done on TV.
Absolutely. But, in this job, too, we get hurt. We get hurt in the line of duty, shot, stabbed, and unfortunately killed. It's just part of the job, and it comes with the territory. When we sign on, we write a blank check. Okay? Yeah. And we don't know when that check is going to be cashed. But we sign on knowing that at some point you can pay the ultimate price.
Yeah, the odds are good on that. I mean,
Yeah.
we're the ones, bullets are coming out of a building, we're the ones running into the building.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody's in the crowd swinging a knife.
Yeah.
We're the ones that got to go after them.
Absolutely. My first experience with somebody that I actually knew being killed in the line of duty happened back in 1987. It was one of my training officers, who was Louis Miller, Detective Louis Miller, who's also known as the Commander. And he had 34 years on the job when he was killed in the line of duty. He spent the last 15 as a training officer. He trained over 2,000 recruits. And one thing about him I remember, if you had a foot post he would show up at your foot post. You used to get 2 of the rookies would get a car tour with an FTO. Everybody had to get a certain amount of car tours. And if you had a foot post, inevitably he would show up on your post and say, hey, the sergeant said you were doing a good job. And he'd give you a lollipop or a candy bar. But what I remember about him is my first day as a rookie, there were 3 squads. And the 2 squads, we were waiting in the parking lot. And the first training officers came in, pulled in the first squad, hey guys, welcome to the precinct, and they went upstairs. It was very jovial, very friendly. Same thing with the second squad. Well, when Louis Miller came down, he was an imposing figure. He was a big man. He came down with his hat squarely on his head, and he called us into formation. Had us line up, dress right, and left face, march us up the stairs, and
Just like the academy.
yeah. And I was like, God, this is not supposed to be. In my mind, this is not supposed to be happening. We just did this. We're done with this. And he was just an amazing guy. He demanded respect for the rank. And I remember when the sergeant came in, he had us jump to attention and salute and the whole bit. But I can go on for hours about him, and I won't because we don't have much time. But with him, the day he was killed, he was working in the 7-0. That was the precinct that he worked. He was always 7-0 John. And there was a call for, I don't know if it was a burglary or home invasion or robbery. The stories vary. But in any event, he showed up and he took the elevator to the 4th floor. This was supposed to be happening on the 5th floor. And he sent his rookies, and he used to call us all his Shark Patrol. That's what we were known as, the Shark Patrol. He sent the people that he was training to the 6th floor. He was in the elevator with another detective, this guy Mark Del Pino. When the elevator's doors opened up, unfortunately, the bad guy was there, and a shootout ensued. Okay, and Louis was mortally wounded but returned fire, and Mark was also shot. And one of the perpetrators was killed, and the other one got away. He was subsequently arrested. But it was a sad day. I mean, this guy, and anybody who knows him, if anybody's listening, they know it's the way, as crazy as it sounds, it's the way he wanted to go. He was just one of those guys. He always made sure we did everything tactically sound and everything was correct, but he was unbelievable. What I remember was when they brought his briefcase back to the precinct the day he was killed, when they opened it up, it was filled with lollipops and chocolate bars to give out to the
rookies.
Yeah, it was a shame. The community lost a great man, so did the police department. And what I did was, for myself, I kind of followed his path. I kind of based the way I do things on the way he did things. You could be a homeless guy on the corner, or a neurosurgeon, or a politician, or the president of the United States, and he gave everybody the same respect. Everybody loved him.
Everybody's a human being.
Yeah, he was an amazing guy. I was blessed to have him as a training officer. There are few people that make such an impression on you as a police officer, and like I said, I was blessed to have him.
It's a hard smack with reality too when that happens,
Yeah.
especially the first time.
Oh,
it never gets easier.
No, it doesn't. I don't even know if you become numb to it, but
There's a lot of things you get numb to, but I don't think losing a fellow officer, I don't think that's anything anybody ever takes lightly.
yeah, no.
You always feel that. You feel that deep stab inside.
Yeah, some hurt more than others. You know, whenever I heard it, always the first thing I hear, officer killed in line of duty, first thing that goes through my mind is, I hope it's nobody I know.
Yeah.
You know, it's bad enough, but it's worse when you know somebody. Well, Fred, the time has actually flown by. This has been a very quick hour. And we're going to take a fast minute break, and then we're going to get back and we'll wrap things up. Guys, again, next time if you want to give us a call and get involved on the action, the number is 954-210-5413. We'd love to have you participate, and we'll be right back.
Are your children in the right car seat for their age and size? Is the seat supposed to be forward-facing or rear-facing? Did they move to a booster seat too soon? It may be too late to check when you're on the road. Fortunately, you're on the couch. Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Don't think you know. Know you know.
Talk to our hosts? Call the podcast studio at area code 954-210-5413. That's 954-210-5413.
Hey, welcome back. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to especially thank you, Fred, for
Thank you.
stepping up to the plate.
This is great fun. Hope I can do it again sometime.
You absolutely can. You absolutely can. I'd love to have you back. And if there's anybody else that you know that would be interested in coming on, so give my information.
I do. I have somebody, guy I met down here. You come down here and you meet cops from New York. It's crazy. But I did speak to somebody today, and I'm going to give you his information. And you can get in touch with him and give him the invite. Have him come down. I'm sure he's got some really good stories. Nice guy.
Good. I definitely look forward to hearing from him. Like I said, guys, we had 2,300 views last time. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in and being part of this adventure. We're all in together. We're all on the same team. God bless everyone, and hope to see you back next Thursday at 7 p.m. from the Broadcast Beat Studios in Oakland Park, Florida. God bless.